The icy, rain-drenched streets of Maplewood, Oregon, showed no mercy as Sarah and her young daughter, Grace, battled through the relentless downpour. This town, typically so picturesque with its enchanting shops and quaint houses, now felt menacing under the oppressive dark clouds and torrential rain. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. "Mommy, I'm so cold," Grace's fragile voice wavered with distress. "We'll find a warm place soon," my darling. Sarah tried to comfort her, though the words felt like empty promises. Her eyes frantically searched the street for any hint of shelter. They had been alone since Sarah's husband had heartlessly abandoned them, leaving her pregnant and completely isolated. The memories of happier times now seemed like distant, painful echoes, each step they took deepening the sense of despair. The world, once filled with hope and love, now felt like a harsh and indifferent place, mirroring the anguish and sorrow etched into Sarah's soul. People scurried by, their faces averted, deliberately avoiding any connection. Each dismissive glance made Sarah's heart ache even more. "Excuse me, Mom," she pleaded to a woman rushing past, but the woman only pulled her coat tighter against the pouring rain, pretending not to hear. As they continued on, Sarah's eyes caught sight of a modest shop with a small awning offering shelter. She guided Grace beneath it, thankful for the brief escape from the relentless downpour. They clung to each other, Sarah enveloping Grace in her arms, desperate to share some semblance of warmth with her trembling daughter. "Mommy, look. It's not raining here," Grace exclaimed, her chattering teeth barely able to contain her small smile. The pure, untainted optimism in her voice pierced Sarah's heart, reigniting her determination. "Stay right here, sweetie." "I'll be back in just a moment," Sarah whispered gently to her daughter Grace, who nodded and sat down obediently. With a deep breath, Sarah stood up and walked towards a man who was busy closing up his small shop for the night. Her steps were hesitant, and her heart pounded with anxiety. "Excuse me, sir," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry to bother you, but do you have any food you could spare?" "Anything at all," her eyes pleaded with him as she spoke. The man looked at her, his expression a blend of pity and wariness. He paused for a moment, as if weighing her request. Finally, with a sigh, he reached into his bag and pulled out a sandwich. "It's not much," he said, his voice gruff but kind, "but it's all I have right now." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she accepted the sandwich with both hands. Thank you so much," she said, her voice choked with gratitude. She quickly returned to where Grace was waiting. "Look, sweetie, we have something to eat," Sarah said, holding out the sandwich. Grace's eyes widened with joy and relief, her face lighting up with a smile that made Sarah's heart ache with both love and sorrow. They sat together, sharing the meager meal. Sarah watched Grace take small, careful bites, savoring every morsel. As she observed her daughter, a surge of determination washed over her. Despite their dire circumstances, Grace's innocent eyes still shone with hope and trust. It was this unwavering faith that gave Sarah the strength to keep going, to keep fighting for a better future for both of them. She silently vowed to herself that she would do whatever it took to protect her daughter and ensure that she never lost that hopeful spark. As night began to fall, the temperature dropped further, intensifying the chill in the air. The relentless downpour showed no signs of letting up. In the growing darkness, Sarah and Grace sought refuge under the scant shelter of a storefront awning in Maplewood. The biting cold seeped through their clothes, making their small huddle seem even more fragile. "Mommy, are we going to stay here tonight?" Grace's voice was small and tired, her earlier optimism fading as the daylight disappeared. She looked up at Sarah with wide, innocent eyes, searching for reassurance. Sarah forced a smile and stroked Grace's damp hair. "We'll find somewhere safer soon," she replied, her voice steady despite the growing uncertainty that gnawed at her. She wrapped her coat tighter around Grace, determined to keep her warm and safe. Suddenly, Sarah noticed an elderly man stumbling through the rain, his frail figure barely visible through the sheets of water cascading down. He seemed lost and confused, his steps unsteady as he made his way towards the awning. "Excuse me, sir, are you all right?" Sarah called out, her concern evident despite the cold and wet that enveloped them. The man looked up, his eyes weary and filled with confusion. I can't seem to find my way home," he said, his voice trembling with cold and fear. "My name is Jacob. I was out for a walk and must have taken a wrong turn." Sarah's heart ached for the elderly man. Despite her own dire situation, she felt a surge of compassion. "Come under here," out of the rain she invited, shifting to make space for him under the awning. "You shouldn't be out in this weather." Jacob gratefully accepted the offer, his body shivering as he stepped under the scant shelter. "Thank you, young lady," he said, his voice filled with relief. "I don't know what I would have done without your help." As the three of them huddled together, the rain continued its relentless assault on the world outside their small haven. Sarah looked at Grace and then at Jacob, her determination solidifying. No matter how difficult their circumstances, she would find a way to protect those in need, starting with her daughter and this lost, elderly man. Sarah dug through her small, tattered bag, retrieving the last piece of bread she had been saving for Grace. She paused, her heart heavy with the decision, then extended the bread and a few coins to Jacob. "Here, take this. It's not much, but it should help you get home," she said, her voice a blend of gentleness and resolve. Grace, her eyes wide with surprise and concern, whispered, "Mommy, that was for us." "I know," darling Sarah responded softly, her hand tenderly brushing a wet strand of hair from Grace's forehead. "But Mr. Jacob needs it more right now." Jacob's eyes brimmed with tears as he gratefully accepted the bread and money. "You are too kind," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "I have nothing to offer in return, but I believe the kindness you've shown me tonight will come back to you in ways you cannot imagine." Sarah's smile was warm and sincere, touched by his heartfelt words. "Thank you, Mr. Jacob. I hope you get home safely." Jacob nodded, wiping away his tears with a shaky hand. "Bless you and your little girl," he said, his voice laden with gratitude. He described his home and Sarah provided clear directions to ensure he could find his way back. As Jacob slowly made his way into the rain-soaked night, Sarah turned to Grace, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and sorrow. Despite their own dire circumstances, they had managed to extend a hand of kindness to someone in need. This small act of generosity, she hoped, would be a lesson for Grace in compassion and humanity. "Mommy, do you think we'll be okay?" Grace asked, her voice tinged with a hopeful innocence. Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, feeling the warmth of their shared bond. "Yes, sweetie," she whispered, her voice filled with determination. "As long as we have each other, we'll always find a way." The rain continued to pour, but in that moment, under the scant shelter, they found a sense of peace and strength in their unity. As Jacob walked away, his figure gradually disappearing into the rain, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. Despite their own dire situation, she knew deep down that she had done the right thing. "See, Grace," she said softly, "sometimes we have to help others, even when we don't have much ourselves. It's what makes us truly human." Grace nodded, her eyes wide with newfound understanding. "You're a good person, Mommy," she said, hugging Sarah tightly, her small arms wrapped around her mother's waist. They lingered under the awning for a while longer, watching the relentless rainfall and listening to the distant, muffled sounds of the town. The patter of raindrops created a soothing rhythm that seemed to wash away some of their worries. Sarah's heart felt lighter, buoyed by the simple yet profound act of kindness she had extended to Jacob. As the night grew colder and the rain showed no signs of stopping, Sarah decided it was time to move. "Let's find a better place to sleep," she said, taking Grace's hand. They ventured back into the rain, their spirits uplifted despite the chill and dampness. They walked through the quiet, deserted streets, eventually finding a small park with a sturdy gazebo. It wasn't much, but it would provide some shelter from the relentless elements. Sarah carefully arranged their few belongings, creating a makeshift bed for Grace with the thin blanket she carried. "Mommy will miss her." "Jacob be okay?" Grace asked, her voice filled with concern as she lay down. Sarah brushed a damp lock of hair from Grace's forehead and kissed her gently. "I believe he will be, sweetie. He's a strong man, and I think our little bit of help gave him the strength he needed to find his way home." Grace smiled, her eyes slowly closing as fatigue overtook her. "I hope so," she murmured, snuggling into the blanket. Sarah sat beside her, watching her daughter drift off to sleep. Despite the cold and uncertainty of their situation, she felt a warm glow of hope. The night was dark and the rain was relentless, but the bond between her and Grace was unbreakable. She knew that as long as they had each other, they would find a way through whatever challenges lay ahead. With a sigh, Sarah lay down beside Grace, wrapping her arms around her to keep her warm. The rain continued to fall, but under the shelter of the gazebo, they found a small measure of peace and security. And as she drifted off to sleep, Sarah held onto the hope that tomorrow would bring new opportunities and a better future for them both. "I believe he will, sweetheart, and so will we," Sarah said, planting a tender kiss on Grace's forehead. "Now close your eyes and rest. Tomorrow is a new day." Grace snuggled into her makeshift bed, her eyelids growing heavy as she drifted off to sleep. Sarah remained by her side, vigilant and thoughtful, her mind replaying Jacob's heartfelt words. She prayed silently, her heart filled with hope for a brighter future for both her and Grace. The evening air was crisp, carrying the lingering scent of rain as Sarah and Grace navigated the dimly lit streets of Maplewood. The storm had finally abated, leaving the town wrapped in a cool, damp serenity. Streetlights cast long, eerie shadows, and the occasional sound of a passing car disrupted the profound silence. "Mommy, I'm hungry," Grace whispered, her small hand clutching Sarah's tightly. The child's innocent plea broke Sarah's heart, yet also served as a beacon of hope in the dim night. "I know," sweetie, Sarah replied softly, squeezing Grace's hand reassuringly. "We'll find something to eat soon, I promise." They continued their quiet journey, the remnants of rainwater shimmering on the pavement under the streetlights. Sarah scanned their surroundings, her eyes searching for any sign of help or shelter. Despite their hardship, the bond between mother and daughter provided an unyielding source of strength and determination. Eventually, they spotted a small cafe, its lights still on despite the late hour. Sarah's heart lifted at the sight. She approached the door cautiously and peered inside. A kind-looking woman was cleaning up, preparing to close for the night. With a deep breath, Sarah knocked on the glass door. The woman looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to compassion as she saw Sarah and Grace standing outside. She opened the door, the warmth from inside spilling out into the cool night. "Hello," Sarah said, her voice tinged with both hope and desperation. "I'm sorry to bother you, but is there any chance you have some food to spare? My daughter and I are in need." The woman's eyes softened as she took in their tired, wet appearance. "Of course, come in," she said warmly. "I was just about to close, but I can fix you something." Sarah and Grace stepped inside, the heat from the cafe enveloping them like a comforting embrace. They sat at a small table while the woman busied herself in the kitchen. Grace's eyes lit up with anticipation, and Sarah felt a glimmer of hope rekindle in her heart. A few minutes later, the woman returned with 2 steaming bowls of soup and a plate of bread. "Here you go," she said, setting the food in front of them. It's not much, but it should help." Tears of gratitude welled up in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you so much," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "You don't know how much this means to us." The woman smiled gently. "It's no trouble at all. Sometimes a little kindness can make all the difference." As Sarah and Grace ate, the warmth of the food filled their bodies, and the simple act of kindness filled their hearts with renewed strength. Sarah looked at Grace, who was smiling despite her weariness, and knew that they would continue to persevere, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The night outside was still and peaceful, the storm's fury having given way to a calm, quiet beauty. And as they finished their meal, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude for the small miracles that had seen them through another day. "I know," sweetie, Sarah replied, her voice soft but determined. "We'll find something to eat soon." As they continued walking, the warm, inviting glow of a small restaurant caught Sarah's eye. The sign above the door read Maggie's Diner, and the rich aroma of home-cooked meals wafted through the air, making Sarah's stomach rumble. Gathering her courage, she approached the entrance, hoping for a small miracle. "Wait here," Grace Sarah said, kneeling to meet her daughter's gaze. "I'm going to see if they have any leftover food." Grace nodded, her trust unwavering. "Okay, Mommy." Sarah stepped into the cozy diner, where a few late-night patrons were finishing their meals. She made her way to the counter, where a kindly-looking woman with graying hair and a warm smile was wiping down the surface. "Excuse me, Mom," Sarah began, her voice trembling with uncertainty. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I was wondering if you might have any leftovers. My daughter and we haven't eaten much today." The woman looked up, her eyes filled with compassion. "Of course, dear. My name's Maggie. Let me see what I can find for you." She disappeared into the kitchen, leaving Sarah to glance around the diner. The cozy booths, the smell of fresh coffee, and the soft hum of conversation made it feel like a haven. Moments later, Maggie returned with a warm smile and a tray laden with food. "Here you go, dear. Some soup, sandwiches, and a little dessert. It should be enough for both of you." Tears of gratitude welled up in Sarah's eyes as she took the tray. "Thank you so much, Maggie. You have no idea how much this means to us." Maggie reached out and patted Sarah's hand gently. "It's no trouble at all, sweetheart. Everyone needs a little help now and then. Take care of yourself and that beautiful daughter of yours." Sarah nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude and relief. She carried the tray outside to where Grace was waiting, the little girl's eyes lighting up at the sight of the food. "Look, Grace, we have a feast," Sarah said, setting the tray down on a nearby bench. They sat together, sharing the meal in the cool night air. Each bite was a comfort, a reminder that even in the hardest times, there are moments of kindness and grace. As they ate, the warmth of the food filled their bodies, and the generosity they had received filled their hearts. Sarah looked at Grace, her daughter smiling despite the day's hardships, and felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. "Thank you, Mommy," Grace said, her voice full of contentment. "This is the best meal ever." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly. "It's not just the food, sweetie. It's the kindness behind it that makes it special." With their hunger sated and their spirits lifted, Sarah and Grace continued their journey, the night air now feeling less harsh and more like a fresh start. They walked through the quiet streets, eventually finding a small park with a sturdy gazebo. It wasn't much, but it would provide some shelter from the elements. Sarah arranged their few belongings, creating a makeshift bed for Grace. "Mommy, will Maggie be okay?" Grace asked as she lay down. "Yes, darling," Sarah whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Grace's face. "People like Maggie always find their way, and so will we." Grace snuggled into the blanket, her eyes closing as she drifted off to sleep. Sarah sat beside her, keeping watch, her heart lighter with the hope that tomorrow would bring new opportunities. As the night settled around them, the lingering scent of rain and the cool breeze felt like a promise of better days to come. A few moments later, Maggie returned, her arms laden with a generous plate of food, steaming hot soup, freshly baked bread, and a small slice of apple pie. "Here you go, dear. Please take this and sit down. I'll bring some more for your daughter." Sarah's eyes welled up with tears of gratitude as she accepted the plate. "Thank you so much, Maggie. You have no idea how much this means to us." Maggie waved her hand dismissively, her smile warm and reassuring. "It's nothing, really. Everyone needs a little help sometimes." Sarah took the plate and motioned for Grace to come inside. Grace's eyes widened with delight at the sight of the food. "Look, Mommy, it's a feast." They found a cozy booth near the window and sat down, the warmth of the diner enveloping them like a comforting embrace. The ambient chatter and clinking of cutlery added to the homely atmosphere. Maggie soon returned with another plate for Grace, accompanied by 2 steaming mugs of hot cocoa. "Thank you," Grace said, her voice filled with genuine awe. She glanced at Sarah, who nodded approvingly before eagerly beginning to eat. The rich aroma of the soup and the freshly baked bread filled the air, making the meal even more inviting. Grace took a careful sip of her cocoa, her eyes lighting up with delight as the warmth spread through her small body. Sarah watched her daughter, a mixture of relief and joy washing over her. "Isn't this wonderful, Grace?" she said softly. "We're so lucky to have met someone as kind as Maggie." Grace nodded, her mouth full of bread. "It's the best, Mommy. I love it." As they ate, Maggie occasionally glanced over from the counter, her heart warming at the sight of the mother and daughter finding comfort in the simple meal. The apple pie was a sweet end to their dinner, and the hot cocoa brought a soothing warmth to their weary souls. After they had finished, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude. She approached Maggie, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "Thank you, truly. We were at our wits' end, and you gave us hope." Maggie smiled and gently squeezed Sarah's hand. "Take care of each other. You're both stronger than you know." With their bellies full and spirits lifted, Sarah and Grace prepared to leave. The rain had finally stopped, and the night air was crisp and refreshing. They ventured back into the quiet streets, the memory of Maggie's kindness fueling their determination to keep moving forward. "Let's find a safe place to rest," Sarah said, taking Grace's hand. They walked through the serene town, eventually finding a small park with a sturdy gazebo. It wasn't much, but it would provide some shelter from the elements. Sarah arranged their few belongings, creating a makeshift bed for Grace. "Mommy, will Maggie be okay?" Grace asked as she lay down. "Yes, darling," Sarah whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Grace's face. "People like Maggie always find their way, and so will we." Grace snuggled into the blanket, her eyes closing as she drifted off to sleep. Sarah sat beside her, keeping watch, her heart lighter with the hope that tomorrow would bring new opportunities. As the night settled around them, the lingering scent of rain and the cool breeze felt like a promise of better days to come. Sarah reached for Grace's hand. "Let's say a prayer." Grace together, they bowed their heads. "Thank you, God, for this food and for the kind people who help us. Please bless Maggie and keep her safe. Amen." As they ate, a profound sense of relief washed over Sarah. The food was not only delicious and nourishing, but it also served as a poignant reminder that kindness and generosity still thrived in the world. Grace giggled as she sipped her hot cocoa, her cheeks rosy from the warmth and comfort of the diner. "This is the best meal ever," Mommy Grace exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with joy and wonder. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. "It sure is, sweetheart, and we have Maggie to thank for that." After they finished their meal, Sarah felt a surge of gratitude that compelled her to approach Maggie once more. "I don't know how to thank you enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your kindness has made such a difference for us tonight." Maggie reached out and gently squeezed Sarah's hand. "Take care of yourself and that beautiful daughter of yours," she said, her eyes shining with sincerity. "And remember, you're always welcome here." With their hearts full and spirits lifted, Sarah and Grace stepped back into the cool night air. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the town bathed in a serene, damp glow. The streetlights reflected off the wet pavement, creating a beautiful, tranquil scene. Hand in hand, they walked through the quiet streets, their footsteps echoing softly in the night. "Let's find a safe place to rest," Sarah said, guiding Grace towards a small park they had passed earlier. There, under the sturdy shelter of a gazebo, Sarah arranged their few belongings to create a makeshift bed for Grace. As she tucked Grace in, the little girl looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Will Maggie be okay, Mommy?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper. "Yes, darling," Sarah replied, brushing a strand of hair from Grace's face. "People like Maggie always find their way, and so will we." Grace snuggled into the blanket, her eyelids growing heavy. "Okay, Mommy, I love you." "I love you too," Grace, Sarah whispered, her voice filled with warmth and hope. She watched as Grace drifted off to sleep, the weight of the day's worries lifting slightly. Sitting beside her daughter, Sarah kept watch, her heart lighter and more hopeful than it had been in a long time. The lingering scent of rain and the cool breeze felt like a promise of better days ahead. With a silent prayer of gratitude, Sarah closed her eyes, finding solace in the small but significant acts of kindness they had encountered. With full stomachs and hearts brimming with gratitude, Sarah and Grace left the diner, the cold night air no longer seeming quite so harsh. As they walked back to their makeshift shelter, Sarah felt a renewed sense of hope. The small acts of kindness they had experienced reminded her that even in dark times, there was always a glimmer of light. The early morning air was biting and damp as Sarah and Grace slept under the shelter of a large tree in the park. The dawn light cast a gray pallor over Maplewood, and the town slowly began to stir to life. Sarah had just drifted into a fitful sleep, her body still tense from the hardships of the previous day, when a loud, gruff voice jolted her awake. Hey, get out of here. This isn't a place for you to sleep." The voice belonged to the owner of a nearby store, a stout man with an unforgiving expression. He stood over them, his face contorted with annoyance. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry, sir. We were just trying to stay out of the rain," she pleaded, pulling Grace up gently, who was still rubbing her eyes in confusion. "I don't care. Move along before I call the cops." The man's harsh tone left no room for negotiation. Sarah's heart sank, but she maintained her composure for Grace's sake. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered, taking Grace's hand. "Let's find somewhere else." They gathered their few belongings and moved quickly away from the park, the man's angry shouts still echoing in Sarah's ears. The cold morning seemed even more biting after the harsh encounter, but Sarah refused to let despair take over. Instead, she held Grace's hand tightly and walked determinedly through the waking town, searching for a new refuge. As they walked, Grace looked up at her mother, her innocent eyes filled with worry. "Mommy, why was that man so mad?" Sarah sighed, forcing a reassuring smile. "Sometimes people don't understand what others are going through, Grace. But it's important that we stay strong and keep moving forward. We'll find a better place soon." They wandered the quiet streets, the early morning light slowly brightening their path. Eventually, they came across a small church with a sign that read "Welcome All." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then decided to approach, hoping for a bit of compassion and warmth. They entered the church, the warmth inside a stark contrast to the cold outside. A kind-looking woman was arranging flowers near the altar and looked up as they walked in. "Good morning," she greeted with a gentle smile. Can I help you with something?" Sarah took a deep breath, feeling a surge of hope. "Good morning. My name is Sarah, and this is my daughter Grace. We're looking for a place to stay, even if just for a little while." The woman's face softened with understanding. "Of course you're welcome here. We don't have much, but we can offer you some breakfast and a place to rest. My name is Mary." "Thank you, Mary," Sarah said, her voice filled with gratitude. "We really appreciate it." Mary led them to a small room with a few chairs and a table. She brought out some bread, cheese, and fruit, along with warm tea. Grace's eyes lit up at the sight of the food, and Sarah felt her spirits lift once again. As they ate, Mary sat with them, listening to Sarah's story. Her compassionate presence made Sarah feel a bit lighter, and she could see that Grace was beginning to relax too. After they finished their meal, Mary showed them to a small corner with blankets and pillows where they could rest. "Thank you so much," Sarah said, tears of relief welling up in her eyes. "Your kindness means the world to us." Mary smiled warmly. "Everyone needs a helping hand sometimes. Rest now and take your time. You're safe here." As Sarah and Grace settled down to rest, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude and hope. Despite the morning's harsh beginning, they had found kindness and refuge once again. Holding Grace close, she whispered, "See, sweetie? There are good people everywhere. We just have to keep believing and keep going." Grace nodded, her eyes closing as she snuggled into the blankets. "I love you, Mommy." "I love you too," Grace Sarah replied softly, her heart filled with renewed determination. The promise of a better future seemed a little more real with each kind act they encountered, and she knew they would find their way through. "Please, we'll leave right away," Sarah said, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and humiliation. She gathered their few belongings quickly, holding Grace close as they stepped away from the tree. As they stumbled onto the wet sidewalk, Sarah felt a wave of helplessness wash over her. She had tried so hard to protect Grace from the harsh realities of their situation, but moments like this made it painfully clear how vulnerable they were. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she forced them back, not wanting Grace to see her despair. "Mommy, why is that man so angry?" Grace asked, her innocent eyes wide with confusion. "Some people just don't understand," sweetie, Sarah replied softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "But we'll find somewhere else, don't worry." Just as they were about to turn the corner, a gentle voice called out to them. "Excuse me, are you okay?" A woman in her mid-40s with kind eyes and a warm smile approached them. She wore a light blue raincoat and carried an umbrella that shielded her from the drizzle. Sarah looked up, her eyes meeting the woman's compassionate gaze. "We're fine, thank you," she said, though her voice betrayed her exhaustion. The woman reached out and touched Sarah's arm gently. "I saw what happened back there. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. My name is Emily. Can I help you in any way?" Sarah felt a lump form in her throat, and despite her efforts to hold back, a tear slipped down her cheek. "We just need a place to stay dry," she admitted, her voice breaking. Emily's expression softened even more. "Come with me," she said kindly. "There's a cafe just around the corner. We can sit there for a while and I can get you something warm to drink." Grateful and relieved, Sarah nodded. "Thank you, Emily. You don't know how much this means to us." They followed Emily to the cafe, a small, cozy place with the inviting aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods. The warmth of the cafe enveloped them as they stepped inside, a stark contrast to the cold, wet street they had just left behind. Emily led them to a table by the window and went to order some drinks. Grace looked around, her eyes wide with wonder at the cozy surroundings. "Mommy, it's so nice here," she whispered. Sarah managed a small smile. "Yes, it is. We're very lucky to have met Emily." A few minutes later, Emily returned with 2 hot chocolates and a cup of tea. She placed them on the table and sat down with a gentle smile. "Here you go. This should help warm you up." "Thank you so much," Sarah said, her voice filled with gratitude as she wrapped her hands around the warm mug. Grace took a tentative sip of her hot chocolate, her face lighting up with delight. Emily reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "I don't want to intrude, but I'd like to help you get back on your feet. There's some money in here. I know it's not much, but I hope it can help you find a place to stay for a while." Sarah's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. "I don't know what to say. You're too kind." Emily shook her head. "It's the least I can do. We all need a little help sometimes, and if you ever need someone to talk to, here's my number." She handed Sarah a small card with her contact information. Overwhelmed by the kindness, Sarah couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She broke down, sobbing quietly into her hands. Emily moved closer, wrapping an arm around her shoulders in a comforting embrace. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're not alone." Grace watched silently, her young mind trying to process the mix of emotions she was witnessing. After a few moments, she reached out and took Emily's hand. "Thank you for helping my mommy," she said softly. Emily smiled through her own tears. "You're very welcome, Grace. You and your mom are very strong, and I know things will get better for you." As Sarah's sobs subsided, she took a deep breath and looked up at Emily. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice hoarse but sincere. The streets of Maplewood were once again soaked by a relentless downpour. The rain seemed colder today, biting through the layers of clothing that Sarah and Grace wore as they trudged along a muddy path. The sky was a sullen gray, mirroring the heaviness in Sarah's heart. "Mommy, why does it keep raining?" Grace asked, her small voice barely audible over the sound of the rain hitting the pavement. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand, her own heart aching with each step they took. "I don't know, sweetie, but we have to keep moving, okay? We'll find some shelter soon." As they turned a corner, a sleek black car sped past them, its tires splashing a wave of icy water onto Sarah and Grace. The sudden shock of the cold water left them both gasping, and the sound of raucous laughter from inside the car stung more than the water itself. "Did you see their faces?" one of the teenagers in the car shouted, their laughter echoing down the street as the car sped away. Sarah stood frozen for a moment, the water dripping from her hair and clothes. Anger and sadness welled up inside her, a turbulent mix of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She looked down at Grace, who was shivering and wide-eyed, her innocence starkly contrasting the cruelty they had just faced. "Mommy, why did they do that?" Grace asked, her voice trembling with a mixture of confusion and hurt. Sarah's heart broke a little more at her daughter's question. She knelt down, wrapping her arms tightly around Grace, trying to shield her from the cold and the pain. "I don't know, Grace. Sometimes people do mean things for no reason at all. But it's not your fault, okay? You did nothing wrong." Grace nodded, burying her face in Sarah's shoulder. "I'm so cold, Mommy." "I know, sweetheart. I know," Sarah whispered, feeling the tears welling up in her own eyes. She stood up, lifting Grace into her arms despite the exhaustion that weighed down her every movement. "Let's find somewhere warm, okay? We'll get through this." As they continued their search for shelter, Sarah's mind raced with thoughts of their predicament, the cruelty of the teenagers, the constant struggle to find safety and warmth, and the ever-present worry about what tomorrow would bring. It all felt like too much to bear. They finally found a small alcove between two buildings that provided some protection from the rain. Sarah set Grace down gently and took off her own coat, wrapping it around her daughter. "Here, this will help keep you warm," she said, trying to smile despite the tears that threatened to spill over. "But what about you, Mommy?" Grace asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'll be fine," Sarah lied, her voice cracking. As long as you're warm, that's all that matters." They huddled together in the alcove, the rain still pouring down around them. Sarah looked up at the dark, stormy sky, feeling a deep sense of desperation. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent prayer, asking for strength to endure the trials they faced. "Please, God," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the rain. "Give me the strength to keep going for Grace's sake. Help us find a way through this." Grace snuggled closer to her, her small body trembling with the cold. "I love you, Mommy," she whispered, her voice filled with trust and love. "I love you too," Grace Sarah replied, her heart aching with the weight of their struggles. She kissed the top of Grace's head, feeling the soft, damp hair against her lips. "We'll get through this, I promise." As they sat in the alcove, Sarah's mind drifted to the kind people who had helped them along the way, Maggie and Emily. Each of them had shown her and Grace that there was still kindness and compassion in the world, even in the face of cruelty and hardship. Sarah's clothes were still damp from the night before, and Grace shivered in her arms despite the coat Sarah had wrapped around her. "Mommy, I'm so tired," Grace whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know, sweetheart. Just a little longer, and we'll find a place to rest," Sarah replied, though she wasn't sure where that place would be. Her mind raced with thoughts of their uncertain future. As they walked, a sleek black luxury car pulled up beside them. The window rolled down, revealing a man in his mid-30s with kind eyes and a concerned expression. "Excuse me, are you Sarah?" he asked, his voice gentle yet authoritative. Sarah hesitated, clutching Grace tighter. "Yes, I'm Sarah. Who are you?" "My name is David," the man replied. "I believe you met my father, Jacob, a few days ago. He couldn't stop talking about the kindness you showed him. I've been looking for you since then." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She remembered Jacob well, the elderly man she had shared their meager food with. "Yes, I remember Jacob. Is he okay?" David nodded. "He's fine, but he's been very worried about you and your daughter. Please let me help you. It's the least we can do after what you did for my father." Sarah felt a wave of relief mixed with apprehension. "Thank you, David. We could really use some help." David stepped out of the car and opened the back door. "Please get in. You must be freezing." Sarah helped Grace into the car and then climbed in herself, feeling the warmth of the heated seats envelop them. Grace looked around in awe, her eyes wide with wonder at the luxurious interior. "Mommy, it's so nice in here," she whispered, snuggling into Sarah's side. "Yes, it is," Sarah replied, her voice trembling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. She turned to David. "Thank you so much. You have no idea how much this means to us." David smiled, his eyes softening. "It's my pleasure. Let's get you both home, get you cleaned up, and something warm to eat." As the car glided smoothly through the streets, Sarah felt like she was living in a dream. The kindness of this stranger, the warmth of the car, and the promise of a safe place to rest all seemed too good to be true. She glanced at Grace, who had already started to doze off, her head resting against Sarah's shoulder. David's home was a beautiful, large house on the outskirts of town. The car pulled up to the front entrance, and David quickly got out, helping Sarah and Grace out of the car. "Welcome to my home," he said, his voice warm and inviting. Sarah took in the sight of the grand house, feeling a mix of awe and gratitude. "Thank you, David. Really, thank you." Inside, the house was just as impressive. David led them to a cozy living room where a fire crackled warmly in the fireplace. "Please, make yourselves comfortable. I'll have some clothes brought down for you and get a meal started." A few minutes later, a housekeeper arrived with fresh towels and clothes. "The bathroom is just down the hall," she said with a kind smile. "Take your time." Sarah and Grace took turns showering, the hot water washing away not just the grime but also a bit of the fatigue and despair that had clung to them. When they emerged, dressed in clean, warm clothes, they found a hearty breakfast waiting for them in the kitchen: pancakes, eggs, bacon, and fresh fruit. Grace's eyes lit up at the sight. "Mommy, look at all this food." Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It looks amazing, doesn't it?" They sat down to eat, savoring each bite. David joined them, watching with a gentle smile as they ate. "You're welcome to stay here as long as you need," he said. "My father would be very upset with me if I didn't offer you a safe place." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "David, we can't thank you enough. We've been through so much, and your kindness is more than we could have ever hoped for." David reached across the table and squeezed Sarah's hand. "You helped my father when he was lost and scared. This is the least we can do. And don't worry about anything. We'll help you get back on your feet." As they finished their meal, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The warmth of the fire, the fullness of their stomachs, and the kindness of David gave her hope that they were finally on the path to a better future. David's home exuded warmth and safety, a stark contrast to the harsh, wet streets Sarah and Grace had known for so long. The house was filled with the comforting sounds of a crackling fireplace and the soft hum of conversation. It felt like a sanctuary, and Sarah couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the generosity of David and his father, Jacob. Sarah and Grace had been given fresh clothes, their own rooms, and an abundance of food. For the first time in what felt like forever, they could relax and breathe without the constant worry of where their next meal or shelter would come from. "Mommy, look at this." Grace's voice was filled with excitement as she explored her new room, decorated with pastel colors and adorned with toys she had only dreamed of. Sarah smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "It's beautiful, Grace. I'm so happy you like it." Grace beamed, hugging a soft teddy bear tightly. "I love it, Mommy. This is the best place ever." David appeared at the doorway, his eyes twinkling with satisfaction. "I'm glad you like your new room, Grace. You deserve it." "Thank you, David," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "You've given us so much. I don't know how we'll ever repay you." David waved off her concerns with a smile. "There's no need to repay me. Just focus on taking care of Grace and yourself. That's all the thanks I need." Over the next few days, Sarah and Grace began to adjust to their new surroundings. They shared meals with David and Jacob, feeling more like a family with each passing day. The warmth and kindness they experienced were a balm to their weary souls. One evening, after Grace had fallen asleep, Sarah found herself sitting by Jacob's bed. He looked frail, but his eyes sparkled with wisdom and kindness. "Jacob, I can't thank you enough for everything you and David have done for us," Sarah said softly, taking a seat. Jacob reached out and patted her hand. "It's our pleasure, Sarah. You showed me kindness when you had nothing to give. That's a rare quality." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "It was the least I could do. You were in need, just like we were." Jacob smiled, a faraway look in his eyes. "Kindness has a way of coming back to us when we least expect it. I've lived a long life, and I've learned that helping others is what gives it meaning." Sarah leaned in, eager to hear more. "Tell me about your life, Jacob. I'd love to hear your stories." Jacob's eyes twinkled as he began to speak. "I've seen a lot in my time. Grew up during the Great Depression, lost family members in the war. But through it all, I learned that love and compassion are what truly matter. I spent many years helping those in need, just like you helped me." Sarah listened intently, feeling a deep connection to this kind old man who had lived through so much yet retained such a warm and generous spirit. His stories were filled with lessons about resilience, hope, and the importance of looking out for one another. Your stories are incredible, Jacob. They give me hope, Sarah said, squeezing his hand. Jacob smiled warmly. And you give me hope, Sarah. Seeing you and Grace find a new beginning here makes everything worth it. As the days turned into weeks, David helped Sarah look for job opportunities, ensuring she had the support she needed to rebuild her life. He made calls, set up interviews, and provided encouragement every step of the way. One morning, David found Sarah in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. Good news, Sarah. I found a position at a local bookstore that's looking for help. I think it would be perfect for you. Sarah's face lit up with excitement. Really? That's wonderful, David. I love books. David nodded. I thought you might. It's a great place, and the owner is a friend of mine. I've already spoken to him about you, and he's eager to meet you. Tears of gratitude filled Sarah's eyes. I don't know how to thank you, David. You've done so much for us. David smiled. Just seeing you and Grace happy is thanks enough. You deserve this chance. That afternoon, Sarah went to the bookstore for her interview. The owner, a kind older man named Mr. Thompson, welcomed her warmly. David's told me a lot about you, Sarah. I think you'll be a great fit here. The interview went smoothly, and Sarah left the bookstore feeling hopeful and excited about the future. When she returned to David's home, Grace ran to her face alight with curiosity. Mommy, how did it go? She asked eagerly. It went really well, sweetie. I think I got the job, Sarah replied, lifting Grace into her arms. Yay! I'm so happy for you, Mommy, Grace exclaimed, hugging her tightly. That evening, they celebrated with a special dinner. Jacob, David, and Grace gathered around the table, the room filled with laughter and joy. The sun rose gently over Maplewood, casting a warm glow through the large windows of David's home. The morning was peaceful, filled with the soft sounds of birds chirping and the distant hum of the town waking up. Good morning, Jacob's Sarah greeted him with a smile as she entered his room. Jacob was already awake, sitting up in bed with a book in his lap. His eyes twinkled with the wisdom of years, and he returned her smile warmly. Good morning, Sarah. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? He replied, his voice gentle. It certainly is, she agreed, opening the curtains to let in the sunlight. How are you feeling today? A bit stiff, but nothing a little fresh air won't fix, Jacob said with a chuckle. Sarah helped Jacob get dressed and ready for the day, her movements careful and respectful. Over the past few days, she had grown to appreciate his kind spirit and endless patience. As they moved to the kitchen for breakfast, Grace bounded in, her face lit up with excitement. Good morning, Grandpa Jacob, Grace exclaimed, giving him a big hug. Good morning, Grace, Jacob replied, his face lighting up with joy. How did you sleep? Great. I had a dream that we were all flying in a big hot air balloon, Grace said, her eyes wide with wonder. Well, that sounds like quite an adventure, Jacob said, laughing. Maybe one day we'll have an adventure like that. They sat down for breakfast, the table filled with an array of delicious food. David joined them, his presence always bringing a sense of calm and reassurance. As they ate, the room was filled with laughter and conversation, a stark contrast to the uncertainty and fear that had once dominated Sarah and Grace's lives. Sarah, I was thinking, David began, looking up from his plate. How would you feel about taking a few more days to settle in before starting at the bookstore? I want to make sure you're completely comfortable and ready. Sarah looked at him, her eyes reflecting her gratitude. That sounds wonderful, David. I appreciate you giving me the time. David nodded. It's important to me that you and Grace feel at home here. Take all the time you need. After breakfast, Sarah and Grace spent the morning with Jacob, enjoying the beautiful weather in the garden. They walked among the blooming flowers, Jacob pointing out different plants and sharing stories about his past. "Did you know, Sarah," Jacob began, his voice filled with nostalgia, "I used to have a garden just like this one. My wife and I spent hours tending to it. She loved roses the most." Sarah listened intently, her heart aching with a mix of sadness and admiration for Jacob's memories. "It must have been beautiful," she said softly. It was Jacob replied, a wistful smile on his lips. "She had a way with plants, just like she had a way with people. She always knew how to make things grow, even in the harshest conditions." They continued walking, Grace running ahead to explore. Sarah found herself feeling more and more at ease, the constant fear and anxiety slowly melting away in the warmth of Jacob's stories and the kindness of David's home. In the afternoon, they gathered in the living room. Jacob settled comfortably in his favorite armchair. Grace sat on the floor with her coloring books, while Sarah sat nearby, listening to Jacob recount tales of his younger days. "During the war," Jacob said, his voice steady, "I met so many people who had lost everything. It was heartbreaking, but it also taught me the value of kindness and resilience. Those who survived were the ones who never gave up, no matter how difficult things got." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she listened. "You've helped so many people, Jacob. Your stories are so inspiring." Jacob reached out and patted her hand. "And now it's my turn to be helped. You've brought so much light into this house, Sarah. You and Grace are a blessing." Later that evening, as Sarah was helping Jacob get ready for bed, he shared one last story that touched her deeply. "There was a young woman I met during the war," he began, his eyes distant with memory. "She had lost her family and everything she owned, but she never stopped helping others. She became a symbol of hope for everyone around her." Sarah felt a lump in her throat. "What happened to her?" "She survived," Jacob said, his voice soft. "She built a new life for herself, just like you're doing now. She taught me that no matter how dark things get, there's always light if you look for it." Sarah's tears flowed freely now. "Thank you, Jacob. Your stories mean so much to me." Jacob smiled, his eyes shining with affection. "And you mean a lot to me, Sarah. I'm so glad you're here." The days had grown warmer and brighter at David's home, a fitting reflection of the hope blossoming in Sarah's heart. The past weeks had been transformative, and Sarah felt more settled than she had in a long time. But there was a lingering desire in her heart, a small but significant wish she hoped could be fulfilled. One morning, over a cup of tea in the sunlit kitchen, Sarah turned to David, her eyes filled with earnestness. "David, there's something I've been thinking about. I'd love to find and thank two very special people who helped Grace and me during our darkest days: Maggie, the owner of the diner, and Emily, who helped us when we were being chased away." David's face lit up with understanding. "Of course, Sarah. It's important to show gratitude. I have some connections in town. Let me see what I can do." True to his word, David's efforts quickly bore fruit. Within a few days, he had located Emily and arranged a reunion at Maggie's diner. Sarah could hardly contain her excitement as they drove to the familiar little eatery where she had once found warmth and kindness. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over Maplewood as they arrived. Grace held Sarah's hand tightly, her eyes wide with anticipation. As they entered the diner, the comforting smell of home-cooked meals and the gentle murmur of conversation greeted them, just as it had before. Maggie looked up from behind the counter, her eyes widening in recognition. "Sarah, Grace, is that really you?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy. "Yes, Maggie, it's us." Maggie hurried over, enveloping them both in a warm hug. "It's so good to see you. And look at you, Grace. You've grown so much." Grace giggled, her face lighting up with happiness. "Hi, Maggie. I missed you." Just then, Emily walked in, her face breaking into a wide smile as she spotted Sarah and Grace. "There you are. It's wonderful to see you again." Sarah hugged Emily tightly, emotions swirling within her. "Emily, I can't tell you how grateful I am. Both of you, Maggie and Emily, you were our angels when we needed it most." David watched from a distance, his heart swelling with pride and happiness at the joyful reunion. He stepped forward and introduced himself, shaking hands with both women. "Thank you for being there for Sarah and Grace. Your kindness has made all the difference." Maggie led them to a large table in the corner of the diner, where they all sat down to share a meal. The atmosphere was warm and filled with laughter, as if no time had passed since their last meeting. Plates of delicious food were shared, stories were exchanged, and for a few hours, the worries of the world seemed to melt away. "So Sarah," Emily said, her eyes twinkling, "tell us, how have you been? What's new in your life?" Sarah inhaled deeply, her heart brimming with emotion as she began to recount the odyssey she and Grace had embarked on since they last met. She spoke of the relentless challenges they had endured, the unexpected kindness from strangers that lit their path, and the unwavering support from David and Jacob that fortified their spirits. "I can't put into words how much your kindness meant to us," Sarah said, her voice quivering with gratitude and deep emotion. "You both gave us hope when we were utterly lost." Maggie reached across the table, her eyes glistening with pride and warmth, and clasped Sarah's hand. "We're so incredibly proud of you, Sarah. You've traversed such a difficult path and come out stronger on the other side." Grace, who had been listening with rapt attention, added her voice to the chorus of love. "Mommy's the best, and I love our new home," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling with innocent joy. Laughter and tears mingled in the cozy diner as everyone marveled at Grace's heartfelt declaration. The evening unfolded with more poignant conversations and cherished memories, each word and gesture a testament to their collective strength. It was a celebration of resilience, the boundless capacity for kindness, and the enduring power of hope that had carried them through the darkest of times. As the night gently drew to a close, Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment wash over her. This reunion had not only brought a sense of closure, but had also filled her heart with immense gratitude. She looked around the table at the faces of those who had become like family to her and Grace, each one a beacon of love and support. "Thank you, all of you," Sarah said, her voice steady but rich with emotion. "You've shown me that even in the darkest times there is light. Your kindness has been our guiding star." Maggie and Emily both had tears glistening in their eyes. "And you, Sarah, are a testament to strength and perseverance," Maggie said softly, her voice filled with admiration. "You remind us all of the importance of compassion." David stood up, raising his glass in a heartfelt toast. "To new beginnings, to the kindness that brought us all together, and to the light of hope that never fades." Everyone raised their glasses, the moment brimming with warmth and connection. In the quiet of the night, with Grace sleeping peacefully beside her, Sarah whispered a silent prayer of thanks for the light of hope that had guided them through the darkest times. She closed her eyes, feeling the tender embrace of love, and knowing that the future held endless possibilities. In that serene moment, she understood that they would continue to find strength in the love and kindness of those around them, forever guided by the unwavering light of hope. Sarah woke up feeling refreshed and filled with a sense of purpose. She glanced at the clock and smiled, knowing that today was a special day. She got out of bed and walked to Grace's room, finding her daughter still asleep, her face serene and peaceful. "Good morning, my love," Sarah whispered, gently stroking Grace's hair. "Time to wake up and start our new day." Grace opened her eyes slowly, a smile spreading across her face as she saw her mother. "Good morning, Mommy." Sarah helped Grace get ready, and together they went downstairs, where David and Jacob were already seated at the breakfast table. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes filled the air, creating a comforting atmosphere. "Good morning, ladies," David greeted them with a warm smile. "Ready for your big day?" "Yes, we are," Sarah replied, her voice brimming with confidence. "Thank you for everything, David. We wouldn't be here without you and Jacob." Jacob nodded, his eyes shining with pride. "It's our pleasure, Sarah. Seeing you and Grace happy is all the thanks we need." They enjoyed breakfast together, sharing laughter and stories. The bond they had formed was evident in every interaction, a testament to the love and kindness that had brought them together. After breakfast, Sarah walked Grace to the bus stop for her first day at school. As they waited, Grace looked up at her mother with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "Mommy, do you think I'll make new friends?" "Of course you will, sweetheart," Sarah reassured her, bending down to kiss her forehead. "You're kind and wonderful, and everyone will see that." The school bus arrived, and Grace climbed aboard, waving enthusiastically to Sarah as it drove away. Watching the bus disappear down the street, Sarah felt a surge of pride and hope for her daughter's future. With Grace safely at school, Sarah made her way to the charming little bookstore. The quaint establishment was already alive with the energy of the morning crowd, and Mr. Thompson welcomed her with a warm wave. "Good morning, Sarah. Ready for another great day?" "Absolutely, Mr. Thompson," Sarah responded, feeling a rush of excitement and a deep sense of belonging. The hours flew by as Sarah threw herself into her work, assisting customers in their search for the perfect books and meticulously arranging the shelves. Each task, no matter how small, filled her heart with a profound sense of accomplishment and joy. She was diligently crafting a brighter future for herself and Grace, one careful step at a time. After a fulfilling day, Sarah returned to David's welcoming home to find Grace joyfully playing in the yard, her laughter resonating through the air like a beautiful melody. Sarah paused, taking in the sight of her daughter, her heart swelling with boundless love and contentment. "Mommy, look. I made a new friend at school," Grace called out, her voice brimming with excitement. She pointed to a little girl standing beside her. "This is Lily." "Hello, Lily," Sarah greeted the girl warmly, her smile radiating kindness. "It's wonderful to meet you." Lily smiled shyly. "Nice to meet you too, Mrs. Sarah." David and Jacob soon joined them outside, and the evening unfolded in a series of simple yet profound pleasures, playing games, sharing heartfelt stories, and soaking in the warmth of their newfound family. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the yard, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of peace. She turned to Grace, who was comfortably nestled in her lap, and hugged her tightly. "Remember, Grace, always be kind and grateful for the people in your life. Kindness has the power to change the world." "I will," Mommy, Grace promised, her eyes sparkling with sincerity. That night, as Sarah gently tucked Grace into bed, she reflected on their incredible journey. They had come such a long way from the cold, wet streets and the uncertainty that once clouded their future. Now, they were enveloped in love, support, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. "Good night, my sweet girl," Sarah whispered, kissing Grace's forehead tenderly. "I love you." "I love you too," Mommy, Grace replied, her voice soft and filled with contentment. As Sarah returned to her own room, she was filled with a deep sense of fulfillment and hope. The road had been long and fraught with challenges, but they had persevered with the help of the kind and compassionate souls who had come into their lives. She knew that more challenges lay ahead, but she also knew they were resilient enough to face them together, united by their love and unwavering determination. Thank you for joining us on this journey, reflecting on the story of the homeless woman helping a lost old man, only to receive an unexpected offer the next day. we're reminded of the power of kindness and the unexpected ways it can return to us. What have you learned from this story so far? Please comment below on one lesson you've taken to heart and plan to bring into practice in your own life. If you liked this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content on timeless teachings and personal growth.